The shortest distance between where you are and where you want to be is a straight line, if you can find it. Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and Outwitting the Devil have helped millions of people around the world achieve personal prosperity faster. Today's guest is probably the most uniquely qualified person on earth to discuss the timeless wisdom in those pages because she wrote some of them. Stay tuned to hear from Sharon Lechter. Welcome to the Main Street Capitalist Show. I'm your host, Russell Gray. We're here on location at the Turning Point USA AmericaFest 2025, and I am honored to have as my guest, live and in person, the co-author of a book you probably have come to know and love, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Sharon Lechter.
Thank you, Russell. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, so I've had you on the Christian Capitalist Show a couple of times, and that's been a lot of fun, but I felt like this would be really good for the Main Street Capitalist Show because you have been coaching business people for a long time. You have built businesses, and I really don't think you get your fair share of credit for some of the businesses that you've built. And obviously the most notable one is Rich Dad. But just for the folks who don't really know the real Sharon Lechter, talk a little bit about what you do, what you've done, and kind of where you're going. And we'll spend more time on the where you're going in just a minute.
Well, thank you, Russell. Yeah, I love working with business owners, helping them to scale and take their business to the next level. Early on, I was a CPA, public accounting, but then I met the inventor of the first talking children's book, with the books that had sound strips down the side, and we grew that around the world. And it was a time when kids had no electronics. I know it's hard to imagine, but they had no electronics back in the late 80s. And so we said, how can we get parents to trust us? So I did deals with little companies like Warner Brothers, Disney, Sesame Street, Marvel Comics. So it took us around the world very quickly. And so I learned a lot about the power of association, the power of licensing, branding, and it helps me understand international trade and printing. And so I was able to take those skills, and I now can help those with business owners in all those categories. That's how when I met Robert, we did Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I became his equal partner, but I was also CEO of the company because I knew how to grow the business. So we were able in 10 years to write 15 books, multiple games, but most importantly, get us into 110 countries and over 51 languages. So during that time, we built the largest personal finance brand. And so understanding the power of scaling, understanding the power of systems. Most businesses fail because they don't build the infrastructure and strength that will allow their business to scale. And so I left there, helped the Napoleon Hill Foundation reinvigorate Napoleon Hill's messaging. And since then, I've written books with Inc. Magazine, Exit Rich. I've written books with Wealth Wave Media, How Money Works for Women. And my most recent one is Old Wealth, New Wealth, True Wealth, with a young man who I think is really a great mouthpiece for his generation. I want to support him in becoming that voice of entrepreneurship and faith. And here we are at AmFest. We talk about faith, and it's so important because entrepreneurship, you have to have faith in yourself, right?
Yes.
And it helps a lot to have faith in God to help you because you're adding value to the world around you. You will benefit.
Well, it's interesting. I talk a lot about purpose, and I think purpose matters. It's what's driven me. And I call it purpose-driven Main Street capitalism because when you know what your purpose is, you may change your strategy and tactics along the way, but that purpose is really your North Star. And I say there's an internal and an external purpose. Right, your internal purpose is what most of us focus on. What do I want to get? What do I want to have? Maybe what do I want to experience? And in some cases, what do I want to accomplish? But ultimately, in order to go into a marketplace, you're going to need to solve the marketplace's problem. And so what is your purpose as a business? What is your mission? And so let's just talk about that for you. You've been involved in a lot of different businesses, but you have maybe a core purpose and a core mission for Sharon Lechter. What does that look like?
Well, To your point, all successful businesses solve problems or serve needs. That's the gap. You're out there solving a problem and serving a need. That's what allows you to become successful. But my personal mission is to elevate the financial well-being of humanity, a pretty lofty mission. But I do that in every aspect, from entrepreneurship, helping business owners take their business to the next level, helping young people get the financial information they need to really take control of their financial life and stay out of debt, right? I have a huge initiative with women because there's a huge transfer of wealth and women aren't prepared for it. So we need to educate them on how to receive that wealth, how to invest it, how to grow it, and how to make it available for future generations. So everything I do is about fiscal responsibility. And that is understanding the power of money and using it for good, not for evil.
Yeah. So let's go back to Rich Dad. I think so many people are going to be interested in that, but I want to take a little bit of a different spin. You talked about scaling, and obviously you built a giant brand, and you really hit a nerve in the marketplace with the message and the way it was delivered. It's literally a transformative piece of literature, if you will. And yeah, I don't know that there's ever been, it's certainly not in the personal finance space, a better selling book, but I don't know that there's really ever been a more powerful book in terms of actually getting people to move from idea to action. But how did you actually build that? Because, I mean, let's face it, there's not a ton of profit in a book, right? And to build a big business and all the different things you got involved in, you start from the humble beginnings of a $200 board game and a book. Like, what was that process like? How did you kind of get out of the gate?
Well, thank you for that question, yes. And Rich Dad did. We redefined how to create wealth in your life. And that is, instead of chasing salary or extra salary, instead of working for money, exchanging time for money, we taught the principles of buying, building, creating, income-producing assets, which is still my message today. Right? You're financially free when the income from your assets exceeds your monthly expenses. And that phenomena was created by Rich Dad. So yes, we did redefine that. My new book, which we'll talk about, is about redefining the definition of wealth. It's not how much you accumulate, it's who you become in the process.
Yes.
So it's kind of a new generation of that. I wanted to redefine people's concept of wealth. And so not just income. So it's really important. In Rich Dad, we built that. Again, we thought we were going to do one book, Rich Dad, as a PR piece for the game Cash Flow. And we ended up, oh no, people wanted more. So we did 15 books, multiple games. But again, it was through that power of association, finding people who had audiences that needed our message. And that's how you scale your business. It's B2B sales instead of B2C. And so we had the opportunity to share it with multiple organizations around the world that were global that helped us spread around the world. When we needed to do infomercials, I wasn't a fan of infomercials, so if we're going to do it, we're going to go with the highest quality. Time Life did our infomercials for us. We were the top infomercial for 2 or 3 years. And so again, looking for who can take us the farthest, who has the people, the systems, the money that want to take our message and spread it around the world. We did the same thing with coaching. I found the top coaching company. They already had the systems, they already had the people. We just needed to train them, and they answered the phone, Rich Dad Coaching, but the systems are already there. I just had to work with the CEO to CEO. I didn't have to manage all the people. They did that. And so that's really the way of the future, is finding somebody who's already doing what you want to in that area, where you can expand their reach, expand their impact by your technology, your information, your content. And that's how we built Rich Dad around the world.
So you call that the power of association, and I call it alliances, but at the end of the day, it's the same concept. And I'm a big believer in that as well. You and I are collaborating to do the same thing, and so that's exciting. And then inside of that is the core skill set to get that done. And you mentioned it, but I want to draw attention to it because I was very fortunate in my career, which was not scripted or planned other than God, deciding how he was going to direct me. But one of the things I had to learn early in my business career was business to business selling. and how to create a long-term relationship with another business. I was just selling business supplies. It wasn't, that sophisticated, but it wasn't a one and done relationship. It was an ongoing relationship. And learning how to do that translated so much more when I moved into this space where I create these business to business alliances. And so when you think of a CPA and your classical training, like where in the world did you learn to be a business to business salesperson? Was that innate common sense? Did you get training? I mean, how did you figure that part out? Because to me, that's a skill. I don't think people are just born that way, but somewhere along the line you acquired that skill and obviously used it very effectively.
Nobody's ever asked me that question before, so let me give you my thought process on that. My dad taught me at an early age. We owned orange groves, and so he had a company that he worked with. They did all the harvesting of the oranges, and he got a check. And he said over time it'll grow in value, and that property is now part of SeaWorld, right? And so I was always looking to say, who's the best in class? Who can we use their skills? And that's truly what an executive needs to do, is find the right people to do the functions that need to be done. But in addition to that, when I was in public accounting, I saw how companies succeeded, and probably more importantly, I saw how companies failed. And they failed because they tried to do everything themselves. They tried to keep it all inside. You succeed by finding the best in class and aligning with them and having good, strong contracts. Licensing is very important, that you have the right contracts and the right responsibilities outlined. And so that's where I really was able to bring that knowledge to the Talking Children's book, to Rich Dad, and now with all my clients. Brandon Dawson of Cardone Ventures.
Love that book, by the way.
Yeah, I met him years ago
mindset.
when he was running Audigy. And he loved my book, 3 Feet from Gold. So I came to speak at his convention, and we're walking down the hallway, and he tells me about the technology he's using to educate the entrepreneurs with his organization. And I said, well, I hope you've put that in a different company, because that's intellectual property. And he said, oh yeah, well, literally last year we were together, and he was telling a group of people that we were teaching that he went home that night and opened and started a company to transfer the IP. And then today that intellectual property is the basis of Cardone Ventures. So I keep telling him, where's my royalty check? But that's what I help people understand, is how to form your business so that you have the ability to create as many income producing assets as possible. If he just left that in the company, it would have gone when he sold the company.
Yeah.
But now he was able to give the company that bought his Audigy a perpetual license, so they didn't lose anything, but he had that as a separate entity that he can now reuse in the basis of his book and the basis of the technology.
So you have the mission, and you decide to scale through association. You use business to business win-win negotiation. Here's what we're going to do for you. Here's what you're going to do for us. You create legal structures to keep all of that tight, where you maintain control and are really creating assets. And I think one of the core strengths is that understanding the importance of the intellectual property component. I'm literally going through that right now myself, because honestly, I've been a little bit weak about it. I'm just a deal guy. I go out there and I create a lot of ideas. I create the associations, but I haven't put enough attention on the structure. So I have intellectual property attorneys going through everything right now, and this time I'm going to do it right. And part of that is because as I've interviewed you and thought about your career and how things were done, I realized, okay, I got to clean some things up. So thank you for that. Going next level, though, at some point, and probably sooner rather than later, you do have a team. It might be a small team, what I call the core team. I call mine the core functions group. These are the people that I work with every day that are managing all these third-party relationships, what I call BULLs, business unit leaders. They may or may not be under my employ. They could be independent contractors, it could be a business-to-business contract, but I got a lot of things going on. People look at me like, Russ, you got a lot going on. Yeah, but I'm tiny. But I still have to wake up every day and get things done through other people. How do you manage that? Because that's an area personally I need to grow a lot in. I'm not great at it. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, at the height of our success, I had 5,000 people working for me at Rich Dad, but only 17 on my payroll, because of that power of association. I was working CEO to CEO. They dealt with the personality problems of their employees. And so, but it's all through very, very tight, thorough agreements on how you're going to manage the relationship and who owns the intellectual property. So in your case, you have a lot of people working for you. Maybe they're not employees, they're contractors. It's very important that you have a work for hire agreement with them that specifies that whatever they create for you is yours once you pay them for it. And that many people forget to do that, so you don't really own what you think you do. So it's very important to structure it appropriately and know that you can expand very quickly when you have the right people, but it's very important that you have the same culture, you have the same code of ethics, and that you have the same mission, and everybody agrees to what the structure is of the relationship. How often are you going to get together to update? What if, I always say, plan the divorce before you plan the marriage. If 3 years down the road you want to separate, let's talk about it while we're still excited about the future. I call it brightness of future. Because when you have high emotion, you have low intelligence. And so plan that type of thing when you're going into the relationship, so it'll be easier to get out of the relationship. But again, managing it by having clear agreements and you stay on top of it, making sure you own what you think you own, very important.
So I want to come back to the kind of the people management component, but you triggered something in that last part that I think is important, and it really goes back to one of the most valuable pieces of intellectual property you created, and that's that BI triangle. So I was at an event the other night, and Josh and Lisa Lannon came up, and they talked about the transformation process Josh went through, coming back from rehab, he and Lisa listening to Choose to Be Rich, and then realizing they needed to go build a business. And I asked him, what was the secret to your success? What did you really, he said, BI triangle, that's the thing. You build a business around that BI triangle, which I believe, was that cash flow quadrant that came out of? Or?
No, it was I think it was Rich Dad's Guide to Investing. We had BI triangle.
Okay, yeah. So it was like one of the first 3 books, though. It was a fundamental concept that you guys created at Rich Dad. Mm-hmm. Talk about that BI triangle.
Sure.
And not just as a piece of intellectual property, an idea that you put out there, but how you actually implemented those concepts in building every business that you've built, not just Rich Dad.
Well, actually, I improved upon that, and we now have essential components of a successful business, then it's a circle. And on the outside, it's mission, leadership, team. That's what holds your business together. And then you start with the legal foundation. Do you have your business structured rightfully, in the right way? Available resource, do you have the right funding? Do you have communication, both internal and external?
Yeah.
Business systems, very important, because that's what really allows you to scale. And then your product. Most people focus on the product, but understanding all of those things work together, and intellectual property comes from every one of those categories.
Yes.
And so if you think about 40 years ago, Fortune 500 companies were 85% bricks and mortar valuation, only 15% intangible. Today, it's the exact opposite. It's over 90% of the valuation of Fortune 500 companies is intangible, which includes intellectual property. And so it's helped level the playing fields for little guys like us. We can compete with the big guys because of our knowledge and our ability to create intellectual property. So I talk about diversification across asset categories: stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, owning other businesses, commodities, but also intellectual property is a very strong asset category for people to take what you know and create an asset out of it.
Well, I've got personal experience with that. As I'm sitting here talking to you, I've got 1,000 Real Estate Guys podcasts in my credit, something like that. I know somewhere out there in cyberspace, somebody's listening to my voice, probably something I recorded 6, 7, 8 years ago. And if you build it on a right business model, that content continues to monetize for a long, long time. We used to think that was only for musicians and actors, or authors, but really, one of the things you said is the business, I think, to paraphrase, the business systems are intellectual property. And I actually had this conversation with some friends of mine the other day, because they have a business where they train people how to do something, and they're very focused on their intellectual property of the training. But I go, the business that you have that operates the distribution of your training, that's intellectual property too. And that property is very, very valuable because you make a lot of money with it, right? Maybe you might be able to pump out 10, 12, 15 different products on that same business model. And so when you think about doing that, we read these books, the hot thing now is EOS, Gino Wickman, and they're very focused on processes, and then maybe processes and systems. I call it core functions, processes, systems, and people. And they work together, and you have all these different core functions, and they're all sewn together into this machine, and then you overlay a financial model where the money has to run. It all sounds good in theory, but it's really hard to organize. When you coach a wild-eyed entrepreneur, this may be like a lot of us, very slanted on sales, action-oriented, you're trying to lock them in a room and lay all this out. What is that process like? How do you actually take somebody who's got really a lot of potential as an entrepreneur, they've got a product, maybe they generated some revenue, but they're not going to scale. If they scale, it's all going to implode, right? How do you build a model that can actually go exponential? Because that's what you did at Rich Dad, and not every business is going to do that, but if it'll never do it if you don't build it to be able to do that. How do you do that?
Well, it's what I do with all my one-on-one clients. It's one of my greatest joys is working with the clients I have one-on-one. And we actually start with looking at where they are, what their history of the business has been. We go through an entrepreneurial profile, so I get a better kind of deep dive into what's happening. I get their financials, and so I normally already know where things need to be focused on by just looking at their history and having that conversation with them. A lot of them are their own bottleneck, because they're still working in the business, not on the business. And so everything has to go through them, right? And that's really hard to grow and scale when everything has to go through the CEO or the founder. And so it's really important to understand what the flow chart of the business is and where the stop gaps are. So we do a deep dive into that to look at it. And then we say, how can we systematize it? Do you have the right people on your team? Do you have people on your team who are strong where you are weak? Okay, what is the system flow and how can we make it better? And then also looking at who do you have from the standpoint of outside vendors? Do you have the right agreements with them? So we start from the very basic legal side of the business to make sure you've built the strength. You have to have if you don't have a good foundation to your house, it's not going to stand tall. So you have to start with a foundation and then look at the systems. Look at how you promote. How do you market? Are you marketing to the right people? Are you serving your customers? A lot of people are into sales, and you sell, it's a transaction. You got to go find the next person to sell to. So I talk about, let's serve, don't sell. When you serve, you create a relationship with your clients, and that gives you a lifetime of sales. So it's very important to go through this process. Every client is different. I'm not a coach. I don't sell a predetermined program. I am a mentor. I step into your world and look at your business, see what your vision is, what your goals are, where you've been, and help you basically grease the skids to be able to get to where you want to go.
So how do you decide who is a good candidate client? Is it based on their mission aligning with your mission? Is it a business that has a certain amount of financial wherewithal or potential? You're probably at a place in life where you don't have to do it for the money, and you don't have to work with people you don't like, or you don't have to support causes you don't support. Like, how do you decide who to say yes to, and what's that process like?
Well, we have a business system for that, Russell. And you go to my website, SharonLechter.com, and there is an intake form of what, if people are interested in being mentored by me, and we go through that ahead of time, and then Angela Topman, my COO, will schedule an interview and talk about what your goals are, where you're going, to make sure that we are aligned, that I feel that I can support you in achieving your goals. And then we will have an initial conversation about the mentoring program, outlining what it is, send a contract, and then a lot of times we want to make sure that the individual is mentorable, right? Coachable. Sometimes people aren't. You talk to them, have you thought of this? And they go, oh yeah, I thought of that. Have you thought of that? Oh yeah, I thought about it. It's a red flag to me. Because it's like, okay, we gotta be able to listen first so that we can make sure we make the right steps.
So you said as a CPA you could look at businesses and you kind of understood from the financials whether they were well run, whether they were doomed?
Well, financials tell me what questions to ask.
Okay. Let's talk about the entrepreneur, him or herself. Are there certain personality characteristics, certain habits, certain flaws or strengths that help you determine if somebody really has the potential to succeed? Do you have to just put them on the field and see what they've got?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because I think, you don't really get to know somebody in one interview. And so obviously we want to know their mission. We want to know their passion. They've got to have enough passion to get through the bumps and bruises, because it's not easy to invest in your business and take it to where you want to go. You got to be willing to listen and make adjustments and take action maybe that you hadn't thought you needed to be able to build your business. And so it is a process. And I think most people that are truly passionate about what they want to do and the impact they want to make are willing to do it. They're willing to invest their time, their money, and their talent and bring in the right advice to make it happen.
So I've been teaching people to raise private capital for a long time. And we've always focused on people, like right now I'm doing it in the residential assisted living space. And I have two criteria. Either you hire a coaching team, a program that has a track record of teaching people who've never done it before how to do it successfully, or you've already done it successfully and you want to scale. So if you don't fit those two categories, I'm not going to teach you how to raise money and practice your craft on somebody else's dime. Do you have people that you coach that raise money, and do you have a criteria like, you're not ready to raise money? What does it take for a person in a business to be ready to go on and take investor capital and take on that added responsibility? If you already got the responsibility, your own money, your own family, you've got your employees and they're betting their life force, their time, their energy, their future on you. That's a level of responsibility every business owner has to carry. When you bring investors on, that's just another added level of responsibility. How do you handle that with your students?
Well, they have to be ready. So we have to make sure their paperwork's in order, their business in order. And there's different levels of raising money, right? Family and friends are a little easier to convince, but they usually have a lot more drama. And then there's the private equity money, and then there's the large capital. So each stage has different requirements, and you have to be prepared. So I help my clients get ready for the stage that they need to be at so that they're ready to have things in order. The worst thing is to go to a private equity firm and they look at your due diligence and it's pathetic. So you get an immediate no. Let's get ready. Let's prepare the documentation. Let's put on the lipstick, but make sure it's valid before you start doing that, so you have a better chance at a yes.
So who do people need to have on their team when they're at the very beginning? They're starting, right? Especially somebody, whether it's sales, marketing. I look at being an entrepreneur as being an organizer. You have a vision, you know what you want to do, and then you got to figure out how to get it done, and you look for people that can help you, right? That's the first mental shift that I think is important, because otherwise you are a sucker for buying courses on how to do everything in the business, and you're going to be an accountant, you're going to be a marketer, you're going to be a technologist, you're going to be a mechanic or a bread maker or a plumber or whatever your business is, right? How do you develop yourself to be the kind of person that actually organizes people, systems around processes to produce a result? Because that's a transformation process too.
Well, a lot of business owners, they've grown in their businesses. They've gotten, they were a consultant or they were with peers. And so if they had a question, they'd go next door and somebody would answer it. Well, all of a sudden they create their own business and everybody's looking to them for the answer. Entrepreneurship can be a very lonely field. And so it's really important to surround yourself with the right advisors, have people that can be there to support you on your journey as you go forward, to make sure you've got the right accounting advice, the right attorney's advice, so that you have the structure and the team that's going to help you grow and succeed.
Let's, because we're coming down to wind down here, and let's talk about exits, right? I think some people build a business to exit, and a traditional exit is you just sell it to a buyer. And you wrote a book about exiting rich, and so are there more? I know there are more than one way to exit a business. Do you have a favorite? Do you have one that you don't like? Do you, and then do you prepare a business and or an entrepreneur differently depending on the kind of exit you're going to take?
Well, you want to know who the potential buyers are. Sometimes it's a strategic buyer, sometimes it's somebody who just wants your database. So you prepare yourself for exit by understanding who your potential buyers are. But you still want to have all your paperwork in order. So you want to make sure you've got everything structured appropriately. And that's something that you do by having the right team. And then, your exit can just be simply letting your employees run it and you exit your time. But if you want to exit, or maybe you want to have it for your children. So you have to understand what your desire is and then set it up accordingly.
That would open up a whole other can of worms, like how do you prepare your children? But we don't have time to go there. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I failed to ask you, something you think is important for people
Russell,
to hear?
It's been a fantastic conversation. I think we really covered a lot. I would just invite people to come to my website, SharonLechter.com. You can email me, info@SharonLechter.com. I'd be happy to hear from everybody.
Yeah, and so Sharon and I are talking about working together on a project that is near and dear to my heart, which is getting financial literacy and entrepreneurial education to young people. So we may have some exciting announcements about that coming in the near future. So I'm guessing you're going to see a lot more of Sharon Lechter on both the Main Street Capitalist Show and the Christian Capitalist Show, and maybe anything else I decide to get involved in right now as I prosecute this mission. Sharon, it's been absolutely delightful as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Ladies
Russell.
and gentlemen, be sure you follow Sharon, visit her at SharonLechter.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.